The maintenance corridor smelled like ozone and old blood. 5 Corvath lay on the floor, 4 arms each, twisted at angles that Curran armor was never meant to bend. Breathing holes whistled with the wet rasp of damaged cartilage. Mandibles clicked weakly, randomly, like broken machines trying to restart. Myra Chun's hands were shaking. The fight had lasted 30 seconds. None of them would ever fight again. She stood in the center of the corridor with her back to the nearest body and her eyes fixed on the data pad she had placed on a pipe 15 feet away. Its screen still glowed, still open to the unfinished sentence she had been typing before they cornered her. The problem with persistence predation is that she could not remember how she meant to finish it. Her right hand curled into a fist, uncurled. The tendons moved under her skin like cables settling after a storm. The chemical flood in her bloodstream was already beginning to recede, leaving behind a strange, hollow clarity. Adrenaline. The humans who designed her body had called it a gift. She had always thought of it as something else. A leash she kept clipped until there was no other choice. She walked to the pipe and picked up the data pad, checked it carefully for damage, found none. "I told you to walk away," she said. No one answered. The Corvath behind her were still breathing. Some of them, that mattered. She had made sure of it during the 30 seconds when everything had gone sharp and clean, and she had seen every joint, every armor gap, every cluster of breathing holes mapped out behind her eyes like a schematic she had been memorizing for weeks. She had not wanted this. That was the part she would carry with her back to her quarters, the part that would keep her awake tonight. She had kept her head down and her voice quiet and her shoulders hunched because she knew what lived inside her, and she was afraid of what would happen if she ever let it out. But they had not let her be invisible. They had pushed, cornered her, left her no choice at all. So she had done what humans had always done when they were cornered. She had survived. Myra turned and walked toward her quarters. Her footsteps made no sound on the metal floor. Behind her, one of the Corvath made a sound like a question. She did not look back. She set the data pad against her hip and kept walking. The reactor hummed somewhere far below, and the corridor lights flickered once, and the 5 broken predators lay exactly where they had fallen. She did not run. She did not rush. She walked like someone who had already won and was already done with winning. What happened next is not what you think. She set the data pad down first, before any of them touched her. Stay close. 3 weeks earlier, the Galactic Union Academy floated in the endless dark between 3 star systems. It was the most prestigious military school in known space. Over 300 species sent their best young warriors to train within its massive halls. The architecture was a compromise of 1,000 different gravitational preferences, wide corridors for the heavy species, climbing surfaces for the arboreal ones, temperature zones that shifted every 50 meters. And this year, something unusual had happened. A human had enrolled for the very first time. Her name was Myra Chun. She was small by galactic standards, barely 6 feet tall, which meant nothing to species that measured in meters and everything to the ones who measured in social significance. Dark hair pulled back, brown eyes that rarely met anyone else's gaze, shoulders permanently hunched, as if she was trying to take up less space than her body actually needed. She walked with her head down. She always chose the seat in the far back corner of every classroom. When teachers called on her, she answered in a voice so quiet that some species could barely hear her at all. The other students watched her constantly during those first few weeks, whispered among themselves about the strange creature from the infamous Sol 3. Everyone knew about that world. A certified Class 12 death world, gravity crushing, atmosphere burning with corrosive oxygen, surface crawling with millions of species that existed only to kill and consume each other. How could anything survive on such a nightmare planet? And yet here was a survivor, sitting among them. But Myra did not act like a survivor of anything. She flinched when doors closed too loudly. She ate her meals alone in the corner of the dining hall. She never volunteered for combat training or sparring sessions. When paired with partners, she moved slowly and carefully and always seemed to lose. The other students began to wonder if perhaps the rumors about Deathworlders were exaggerated. Instructor Velkith was not so sure. He was Seafarian, a towering reptilian creature with 4 muscular arms and scales the color of deep bronze. His eyes had seen over 300 years of combat across a dozen worlds. He had trained warriors from every corner of the galaxy, and he had learned to read body language that most others missed entirely. When he watched Myra Chun, he saw something that troubled him deeply. She moved wrong, not badly wrong. When she walked, her footsteps made almost no sound, even though humans were supposedly heavy creatures. When she sat, She positioned herself where she could see every door and window. Her eyes, those quiet brown eyes that never seemed to focus on anything, actually tracked every movement in the room with a precision that Velketh had only seen in master predators. He had read her file 3 times. The official documents said she came from a region of Earth called East Asia, that she had lost her family in something called a civil conflict, that she had survived alone for 2 years before the Galactic Union made first contact with humanity. The file said she had been selected for the Academy because of her exceptional aptitude scores. It did not explain what those scores measured. Velketh found himself wanting to know more. He filed the curiosity away and marked it for later. The Corvath students had no such curiosity. They were a proud species from a Class 7 world, apex predators. Natural armor made of thick Curran plates that could stop most weapons, claws that could tear through hull plating, mandibles that clicked together when they were excited or angry. There were 5 of them at the Academy. Their leader was a young male named Thresh. He had never lost a fight in his entire life. From the moment he saw Myra, he decided that he did not like her at all. She was weak, pathetic, everything a warrior should not be. Her presence at their prestigious academy was an insult to every true predator species in the galaxy. That was what Thresh believed, and he made sure everyone knew it. It started small, as these things always do. A shoulder check in the corridor that sent Myra stumbling against the wall. Thresh simply walked past without looking back as his packmates chittered with laughter. The next day, someone knocked her data pad from her hands. It clattered across the floor, scattering her notes everywhere. When she knelt to gather them, a clawed foot stepped on one of the pages and tore it in half. Myra said nothing. She gathered what remained of her notes and walked away with her head down. The Corvath laughed louder. They had found something entertaining to pass the time. The harassment continued for weeks. Slurs whispered just loud enough for her to hear: dirt crawler, primitive, death rock vermin. Food spilled on her tray accidentally. Seats taken just as she was about to sit down. Through it all, Myra remained silent, still small. She never reported the behavior, never complained to any instructor. Velketh noticed. Of course he noticed. He filed the reports and documented the incidents and scheduled a meeting with the Corvath students for formal discipline. But the academy had procedures, protocols. The meeting was set for 3 days away. Surely nothing terrible could happen in just 3 days. He watched Myra more carefully now. He saw how she tracked the Corvath whenever they entered a room, how her breathing changed slightly when Thresh walked past, how her hands, strange, 5-fingered human hands, sometimes curled into fists at her sides before slowly relaxing again. He saw all of this. He recognized it. He had seen it before in soldiers who had survived terrible things. He knew that there was something coiled tight inside this quiet girl, something waiting for a reason to spring free. But he did not act quickly enough. He thought he had time, thought the procedures would protect her, thought that surely even the Corvath would not be foolish enough to truly attack a student within the academy walls. He was wrong on all 3 counts. By the time he realized his mistake, it would be far too late to stop what was coming. The quiet girl from the death world had already made her own preparations, and the predators who thought they were haunting her had no idea that they were about to learn the most important lesson of their young lives. Never corner something that came from a world where everything was designed to kill. Thresh had been watching her for weeks. He had learned her patterns, discovered that she walked through the lower maintenance corridor every evening after the last meal because it was the shortest path to her quarters. The corridor was perfect, narrow passages filled with pipes and cables, dim lighting, few cameras. The only sound was the deep, constant hum of the reactor core somewhere far below. The perfect place for predators to hunt their prey. Thresh gathered his 4 packmates, positioned them at both ends of the passage. There would be no escape. Tonight, they would teach this pathetic creature what happened when weaklings pretended to be warriors. Myra entered the corridor at exactly the time Thresh expected. She walked slowly, data pad tucked under one arm, eyes fixed on the floor ahead of her feet. She did not seem to notice the shadows moving in the darkness around her, until Thresh stepped out to block her path. His 4 companions emerged from behind her. She stopped walking. She did not turn around, simply stood there in the middle of the corridor with her back to the 4 Corvath behind her, and her eyes still pointed downward at the floor. "Deathworlder," Thresh said. His mandibles clicked together with amusement. "You think you belong here among civilized species. You think you can walk through our halls and sit in our classrooms and pretend that you are one of us." The 4 Corvath behind her chittered with laughter, began moving closer. Their claws scraped against the metal floor with a sound like knives being sharpened. Their eyes gleamed in the dim light with the excitement of predators who had cornered something helpless. "We're going to teach you a lesson about knowing your place," said Keth. He was Thresh's second in command and the largest of the five. "Maybe we'll break a few of those dense little bones of yours. Maybe we'll see if Deathworlders really heal as fast as the rumors say. I've always wanted to test that theory." The others laughed again. The sound echoed off the metal walls and pipes. Myra did not move, did not speak, did not even lift her head. She just stood there like a small animal frozen in fear. Thresh felt a surge of satisfaction. This was exactly what he had expected from such a weak and pathetic creature. He stepped closer until he was only a few feet away from her. He could smell her now. That strange human scent of salt and something else he could not identify. He could see how small she truly was compared to him. He was twice her mass at least. His natural armor could stop most weapons. His claws could tear through hull plating. She was just soft flesh and thin bones. Nothing else. "Look at me when I speak to you, dirt crawler," Thresh commanded. He reached out with one clawed hand to grab her shoulder and spin her around. That was when Myra finally moved. She set her data pad down on a nearby pipe, carefully, gently, as if she had all the time in the world. Then she straightened her spine, rolled her shoulders back, lifted her head. When she turned to face Thresh, something in the corridor changed. The hunched posture was gone. The nervous trembling was gone. The scared little creature who had flinched at loud noises and eaten alone and lost every sparring match was gone completely. What remained was something else entirely. Something that looked at Thresh with eyes that held no fear at all. "I am going to give you one chance," Myra said. Her voice was different now, still quiet, but there was something underneath it, like rocks grinding together deep underground. "Walk away and this ends here." Thresh stared at her in surprise. This was not how prey was supposed to behave when it was cornered and outnumbered. This was not the reaction he had expected at all. For just a moment, a single heartbeat, something cold touched the back of his mind. A whisper of warning. But he was Korvath, an apex predator from a Class 7 world. He had never lost a fight. He had never backed down from anything. He was not about to start now because some tiny human had suddenly decided to pretend she was brave. "It speaks," Thresh said. He forced a laugh that his packmates echoed behind him. "The little death rock vermin finally speaks, and it threatens us. This will be even more entertaining than I hoped." "I gave you a chance," Myra said. She shifted her weight slightly. Her hands came up in front of her in a position that Thresh did not recognize. "Remember that when this is over. Remember that I tried to let you walk away." Keth laughed from behind her. "There are 5 of us and one of you human. What exactly do you think you're going to do?" Myra did not answer with words. She simply looked at each of them. A slow, careful examination that lasted only seconds but seemed to take much longer. Thresh realized with sudden unease that she was not looking at them with fear or desperation or anger. She was looking at them the way he looked at training dummies before a combat exercise. She was looking at them like they were already defeated. They just did not know it yet. "Enough talk," Thresh snarled. He pushed away the cold feeling in his gut because it was ridiculous to be afraid of something so small. "Hold her down. Let's begin." The 4 Korvath behind her lunged forward, claws extended, mandibles spread wide. Thresh attacked from the front with a strike that had killed creatures twice the human size. And in that moment, 5 apex predators from a Class 7 world committed the worst mistake of their entire lives. They cornered a human. They gave her no choice but to fight back. And they were about to discover exactly why Sol 3 was classified as a Category 12 death world. Why every species that knew about Earth had learned to be very, very careful around its survivors. What the Korvath did not understand, what no species at the Galactic Union Academy truly understood, was what a Class 12 death world actually created. When it forced life to evolve under its brutal conditions for millions upon millions of years. Earth was not just a planet with heavy gravity and a corrosive atmosphere and extreme temperatures. It was a world where every single creature that survived had to fight constantly against everything else that wanted to eat it or kill it or take its territory. A world where the weak died young, where only the most adaptable, the most ruthless, the most persistent could live long enough to pass on their traits to the next generation. Humans were the ultimate survivors of that endless war. They were not the fastest creatures on Earth. Birds and fish and 4-legged hunters could outrun them easily. They were not the strongest. Bears and elephants and gorillas could crush them with little effort. They were not the most armored or the most venomous or the most numerous. And yet somehow they had risen to dominate their entire planet, spread to every corner of it, despite all the things that should have killed them. The secret was simple. Humans were persistent predators. Their bodies were designed to keep moving long after other creatures collapsed from exhaustion. They could regulate their temperature through sweating, which allowed them to hunt in the hottest parts of the day when other predators had to rest. They could heal from injuries that would kill most species. They could function without sleep for days when necessary. And most importantly, their brains were wired to track patterns, predict movements, remember weaknesses, plan attacks with a patience that bordered on obsession. When Thresh's claws came at Myra's throat, she was not there to receive them. She had read his body language, the tension in his shoulders, the angle of his eyes, the slight shift of his weight. She had known exactly where his attack would land before he even launched it. She simply moved to the side and let his claws pass through empty air. Before he could recover, she was already striking. Her palm hit the joint where his upper arm connected to his thorax. It was a gap in his current armor that she had noticed weeks ago, when she watched him move through the corridors, when he thought she was just a scared little creature with her head down. She hit it with a precise, focused blow that drove the force of impact directly into the soft tissue beneath. Something cracked. Thresh let out a screech of pain and surprise. But Myra was not finished. She was already turning to face the 4 attackers behind her. Keth was the closest, the largest. He swung both arms in a wide arc meant to grab her and pin her down. But Myra dropped low and slid beneath his reach, drove her elbow upward into the cluster of breathing holes on the underside of his thorax. His air rushed out in a strangled gasp. He doubled over. Myra was already moving to the next one. The 3rd Korvath tried to slash her with his claws. She caught his wrist and twisted it in a direction the Curran joints were not meant to bend. There was a snapping sound, a scream. He fell to his knees, clutching the ruined limb. Myra kicked him in the head, hard enough to bounce his skull off the metal floor. The 4th one hesitated. He had just watched 3 of his packmates fall in less than 5 seconds. Suddenly, he was not sure he wanted to be here anymore. That hesitation cost him everything. Myra closed the distance between them in 2 quick steps, hit him in the throat with the edge of her hand. He collapsed, choking and gasping for air. The 5th one tried to run. Myra caught him before he made it 3 steps, grabbed one of his legs and pulled. He crashed to the floor. Then she was on top of him, driving her knee into the nerve cluster at the base of his spine. He went limp with a whimper, did not move again. All of this took less than 30 seconds. Thresh was still trying to stand when Myra turned back to face him. His arm hung useless at his side. His mandibles clicked wildly with shock and pain, and something he had never felt before in his entire life. Fear, pure, overwhelming fear of the small creature walking toward him with death in her eyes. "You asked what I was going to do," Myra said. Her voice was calm and even, as if she had just finished a light exercise rather than defeating 4 apex predators. "Now you know." She hit him twice more, once in the other arm joint, once in the side of his head where the Curran was thinnest. He dropped to the floor, did not get up. The corridor was suddenly very quiet, except for the groaning of 5 broken Korvath and the steady hum of the reactor below. Myra stood in the center of the corridor, took a slow breath. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from the chemicals flooding her bloodstream that humans called adrenaline, the same chemical that had allowed her ancestors to fight off predators and hunt animals many times their size and survive wounds that should have killed them. It was still surging through her veins, making everything sharp and clear and focused. She had not wanted this. That was the part she would carry with her, the part she would try to explain if anyone asked. She had come to this academy hoping to start a new life, far from the violence that had taken her family and destroyed her home. She had kept quiet and kept her head down and tried to be invisible because she knew what lived inside her, and she was afraid of what would happen if she ever let it out. But they had not let her be invisible. They had pushed until there was nowhere left to retreat, cornered her and threatened her, and left her no choice at all. So she had done what humans had always done when they were cornered. She had survived. Myra walked to where she had set down her data pad, picked it up, checked it carefully for damage, found none. Then she looked back at the 5 Korvath lying on the floor behind her, felt something that might have been pity, or might have been disgust, or might have been nothing at all. "I told you to walk away," she said quietly. Then she turned and continued toward her quarters, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. What Velketh didn't know yet, what the security footage would eventually show, was that she had placed her data pad on the pipe deliberately, gently, as if she had all the time in the world. The emergency alert reached Instructor Velketh 7 minutes later. His communication device screamed with the urgent tone reserved for medical emergencies. He was running before he even finished reading the message. 5 students down with severe injuries in Sector 7. Cause unknown. Immediate response required. He grabbed his weapon from its rack, summoned the security team, raced through the corridors faster than he had moved in decades. His forearms pumped at his sides. His claws clicked against the floor with each stride. His mind ran through every terrible possibility of what he might find when he arrived. The Corvette had finally gone too far. They had attacked his human student. He had failed to protect her. Now she was lying broken somewhere in the depths of the station. But when he burst into the maintenance corridor with his weapon raised and his security team spreading out behind him, he did not find what he expected. Myra was not there. The only bodies on the floor were the 5 Corvath students. They were not dead, but they were definitely not in good condition. Thresh lay in the center of the corridor with both arms bent at angles that made Velketh wince. His Curran was cracked in multiple places. His breathing was shallow and rapid. His eyes were unfocused with shock. Keth was nearby with one hand pressed against his throat, struggling to pull air through his damaged breathing holes. The other 3 were scattered around them in various states of injury. None of them were moving much at all. What happened here? Velketh demanded as the medical team rushed past him to begin treatment. Report. One of the security officers scanned the area with his equipment, shook his head in confusion. No weapons fired detected, no explosive residue, no chemical agents. These injuries appear to be the result of physical combat, but there are no other bodies, no blood except from the Corvath themselves. I don't understand what could have done this to 5 apex predators. Velketh understood. The cold feeling he had been carrying in his gut for weeks suddenly spread through his entire body as he looked at the broken bodies of the students who had been tormenting Myra-chan. He understood exactly what had happened here. He felt like the biggest fool in the entire galaxy for not seeing it sooner. He knelt down next to Thresh, forced the young Corvath to focus on his face. Tell me what happened. Tell me who did this to you. Thresh's mandibles clicked weakly. His voice came out in a ragged whisper. The human, the Deathworlder, we thought she was weak. We thought she was afraid. We cornered her and she... He stopped, shuddered. Something that looked very much like tears leaked from the corners of his compound eyes. She was not afraid. We outnumbered her 5 to 1 and she was not afraid at all. Keth added from nearby. His voice was barely audible through his damaged throat. She just looked at us, like she already knew exactly what she was going to do, like she had been planning it for weeks. Like we were nothing, less than nothing, just obstacles to be removed. Velketh stood up slowly. He had trained warriors for 300 years. He had seen every kind of fighter from every corner of the galaxy. He knew exactly what Keth was describing. It was the look of a true predator, not the arrogant confidence of young hunters like the Corvath, but the cold, calculated certainty of something that had faced death so many times that violence had become as natural as breathing. He had read the files about humans, studied their history and their biology and their psychology. He knew that they came from a world where everything tried to kill them from the moment they were born. He knew that they had evolved as persistence hunters who could track prey for days without rest until their targets collapsed from exhaustion. He knew that their bodies contained chemical systems that could temporarily increase their strength and speed and pain tolerance to levels that other species found difficult to believe. But knowing facts and truly understanding what they meant were 2 very different things. Velketh had made the mistake of thinking that this quiet, broken-seeming girl was somehow different from the rest of her species. He had thought her silence meant she was weak, thought her isolation meant she was vulnerable. He had thought wrong. He left the medical team to finish their work, walked through the corridors toward the student quarters. His mind churned with questions and concerns, and a strange new emotion he could not quite identify. Was it respect, or was it fear? Perhaps a mixture of both. The official investigation lasted 3 days. It reached a conclusion that surprised absolutely no one who had access to all the facts. The 5 Corvath students were found responsible for initiating an unprovoked assault on a fellow student. Their injuries were determined to be the direct result of their own actions. They were expelled from the academy, sent back to their home world in disgrace. The incident was classified at the highest level to prevent it from causing diplomatic problems between species. But rumors spread anyway. They always do in places where young warriors gather to train and compete and prove themselves against each other. The story traveled through the dormitories and the training halls and the dining facilities like fire spreading through dry grass. It changed and grew with each telling. Some versions claimed that the human had torn off one of Thresh's arms with her bare hands. Others insisted that she had moved so fast that no one could even see her strikes. One particularly creative version suggested that she had some kind of hidden weapon or secret power that allowed her to defeat any opponent. None of these stories were true. The truth was somehow more frightening. The truth was that a small, quiet human with no weapons and no armor and no special powers had simply dismantled 5 apex predators using nothing but her training, her instincts, and the biological heritage of a species that had spent millions of years learning how to kill things bigger and stronger and faster than themselves. Instructor Velketh decided that the truth needed to be understood, so he added a new module to his combat theory course. He called it Understanding Deathworld Psychology, and he made it mandatory for every student, regardless of their species or their home world classification. He stood at the front of the lecture hall, looked out at the hundreds of young faces watching him, told them things that many of them did not want to hear. "You think you understand what a death world is?" he began, his voice carried to every corner of the massive room. "You have read the classifications, studied the survival statistics, perhaps even visited one of the lower category death planets during training exercises. But I am here to tell you that you do not understand at all, not until you have faced something that was born on a Class 12 world and lived long enough to reach adulthood." He activated the display behind him. Images of Earth appeared, beautiful images, blue oceans and green forests and snow-capped mountains that looked almost peaceful, until you noticed the predators lurking in every shadow, the diseases floating in every breath of air, the natural disasters waiting to strike without warning. "Humans evolved on this world," Velketh continued. "They had no claws, no armor, no venom, no ability to fly or swim at high speeds. By all logic, they should have gone extinct millions of years ago, eaten by the countless creatures that were better equipped for survival than they were." He paused, let that sink in. But they did not go extinct. Instead, they became the dominant species on the entire planet. He looked directly at the students. Many of them glanced toward the back corner where Myra Chun sat alone. As she always did, she did not look up from her data pad. But somehow everyone felt certain that she was listening to every word. "Humans are persistence predators," Velketh explained. "This means they do not need to be fast because they never stop moving. They can chase prey for days, literally days without rest, until their target collapses from exhaustion and overheating. No other species in the known galaxy has this ability developed to such an extreme degree." He changed the display, showed the human body with its various systems highlighted. Their cardiovascular system is designed for endurance beyond anything most species can comprehend. Their cooling system, they call it sweating, allows them to remain active in temperatures that would force other predators to rest. Their skeletal structure includes dense bones that can withstand impacts that would shatter lighter frames. Their muscles are anchored to those bones with tendons that store and release energy with incredible efficiency. More images appeared, humans running, climbing, swimming, fighting. Their brains contain more pattern recognition capability than any other known species. They can track movement, predict behavior, identify weaknesses faster than their prey can react. They are constantly analyzing everything around them, looking for advantages, calculating risks, planning strategies, even when they appear to be doing nothing at all. He looked directly at the students now, and they have a chemical system called the adrenaline response that can temporarily increase their strength and speed and pain tolerance by factors of 3 or more. When a human is truly threatened, their body floods with chemicals that make them faster and stronger and nearly immune to injury, and they can trigger this response at will. Once they learn how, the lecture hall was completely silent. Every student was staring at the display, or at Velketh, or at the quiet figure in the back corner who still had not looked up from her data pad. "The key points are simple," Velketh concluded. "First, never assume a human is helpless because they are smaller or quieter or less obviously dangerous than you. Second, never corner a human and leave them no choice but to fight, because that is exactly when their survival instincts activate. Third, never mistake silence for weakness." He shut off the display. The room fell into darkness for just a moment before the regular lights returned. The quiet ones are often the most dangerous, because they have learned to control something that most of their species never fully master. He walked to the door of the lecture hall, paused. "There was an incident recently that I cannot discuss in detail due to its classified nature, but I will tell you this much. 5 students attacked one human, and all 5 of those students are currently recovering from injuries severe enough to end their military careers." He looked back at the room one last time. The human was not injured at all. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. heavier. Let that be your lesson for today. Let that be the thing you remember when you meet a human and think that they look weak or scared or easy to defeat. They are none of those things. They are survivors of a world that makes our worst nightmares look like pleasant dreams, and they carry that world inside them, wherever they go. The semester continued after that. Classes resumed. Training exercises went on. Life at the academy returned to something like normal. But everything had changed, in ways both large and small. Myra Chun still sat in the back corner of every classroom. She still spoke only when spoken to, kept her eyes down, ate her meals alone. She still walked with her shoulders slightly hunched, still flinched at loud noises sometimes. But now when she walked through the corridors, the other students stepped aside to let her pass. They did not do this out of hatred or cruelty. They did not even do it entirely out of fear. They did it out of respect. Respect for the quiet girl from the Deathworld, the one who carried thunder in her bones and lightning in her blood, who chose every single day to keep all of that power silent and still and under control. Because they finally understood what Instructor Velketh had been trying to teach them. They finally understood that true strength was not about being loud or obvious or threatening. True strength was about having the power to destroy everything around you and choosing not to use it, unless there was absolutely no other option. Myra Chun had that strength. She had always had it. And now the entire galaxy was beginning to learn what that really meant. Velketh had arrived too late to stop the fight, but perhaps that was exactly what needed to happen. Perhaps the galaxy needed to see what a human could do when pushed too far. Perhaps the 5 broken Korvath were exactly the lesson that everyone needed to learn. Myra walked to the back corner of the lecture hall. She set her data pad down on the desk. It was the same device, unbroken. The screen still had that small crack from when Keth had stepped on her notes weeks ago. The crack had not grown. The device had not failed. It had simply endured. Like her, she did not look up as Velketh began to speak. She did not need to. Everyone was already watching her differently. She had finally found a place where her silence was not seen as weakness. And that was all she had ever really wanted.